Hello, everyone. Welcome to this week's Investment Trends, where we discuss the latest news in the stock market and the economy. So, for this week, we had an action-packed week, and we saw the markets once again hit a new all-time high. And so, joining me today, once again, is John McKay, our portfolio manager. And John is going to break down some key components of what we're seeing in the market. And we'll talk through some of the other news headlines, including a huge run up in Ford stock, and also what to expect from some of the big headline IPOs that could be on the horizon. But to first, as we get started here, obviously we had a new Fed chair come in. And one thing to keep an eye on, especially in the near term and over the next 3 to 6 months, would be inflation. So, John, what are you seeing around, kind of looking at what the Fed would be looking at and what inflation numbers are looking like?
Yeah, we saw April core PCE numbers come in this week at 3.3%, a tick higher than they were in March. Um, you look at that and still oil kind of not seeming as high as it should be given the supply glut we have. It's really seems like we're going to be in an inflationary trend for some time coming out of this. So while people were optimistic that Warsh's Fed would at least come in dovish and maybe get a cut this year, all the signals we're seeing kind of lean more towards a hawkish Fed where they're going to have to be combating inflation once he gets into office.
Right. Yeah, I saw recently on the news headline that they're now predicting, so economists are now predicting that the first rate cut for 2026 might not be until December. So that goalpost has kind of continued to move and continued to be pushed back. Obviously something to keep an eye on. I know that the new Fed chair said that his goal is to kind of be less in the spotlight, like almost have less communication, less meetings, and be more so in the background on things. But obviously something that people were hoping for some relief, and we've actually seen, the 10-year rate number tick higher. Mortgage interest rates have actually ticked up a little bit as well. So something that is a little bit unfavorable for the goal of the new Fed chair. So
Yeah, and
also, yeah, go ahead, John.
additionally, we're seeing uh, percentage prediction of a rate height by end of year climb. It's actually moving towards about 50% right now, which most of the market, like we had talked about, was anticipating a cut. And now a little bit of a curveball with people,
Yeah.
about coin flip looking at potential of a rate hike, which markets had not been anticipating to this point.
Yeah. Yeah, that would really be something. That would yeah, if people were looking for a sign of what could cause some headwinds in the market, that would definitely be it. A rate increase at this point. So but that kind of brings us to our next topic, which the markets continue to roll on. Obviously we saw some great numbers as far as the major indexes are concerned. In one of the things that you'd mentioned, when we were talking earlier in the week, is there may be some cracks, starting to form with some of the stocks and things that you're looking at.
Yeah, and a lot of that is looking again with this situation in Iran. Once there's a solution, oil doesn't just hit the market immediately. There have been capped wells. There's a huge backlog of shipping. It's not going to be the market just snaps back day one. Um, there's a lot of derivative effects looking a little bit longer term, but we see that kind of AI and tech trade continuing to carry the market. Um, specifically this week, Micron, which is a memory play within the AI space, has been on an absolute tear.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah, it's been something to watch as it reached the $1 trillion club. which was the memory chip maker. I mean, there's obviously some major tailwinds behind it. As much as 80% growth in that stock recently, as the AI demand surge rages on. People are comparing it to the new Nvidia, right? I mean, Nvidia has been solid, but many people now seem to be shifting their focus to Micron.
Yeah, and with that, kind of the two sections we see as having high growth potential still are those memory players as well as the infrastructure and power. Um,
Yep.
those are kind of the two big bottlenecks that we're seeing right now in AI growth and demand.
Yep. Yeah, that's I keep reading about that as well. They talk about the picks and shovels, the things that are going to power AI and what that might look like. Infrastructure is a good sector to be in during this time as well, to try to continue to ride the momentum of what we're seeing. And then another kind of interesting story from what you saw from a long-standing car maker, car manufacturer here in the U.S. Ford stock has certainly kind of jumped off the screen here with what we're looking at. So, what was kind of the story behind that, and what you saw with Ford this week?
Yeah, the story there is towards the end of 2025, Ford took about a $19.5 billion write down on their electric vehicle division. Um, they had poured money into that for years and never really caught on. Um, rather than completely scrapping the division, they've kind of shifted that into what they're calling Ford Energy, with the idea of those taking the technology they had for some of those vehicle batteries and turning that into power storage for AI data centers, specifically with, I believe it was a 4.5 gigawatt agreement for deployment this year. And that is a strong tailwind for Ford being able to kind of take that capex that they had put into electric vehicles and actually deploy it in the market.
Yeah. 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 Very interesting story, and definitely something to keep an eye on as well. So, and then looking at the kind of our last topic here, wanted to touch on it briefly. We'll probably do a deeper dive in the near future, as this is an ongoing thing, and it's been a major headline in the market for this year, has been the IPO wave. So, what could potentially be on the horizon? Um, Companies seemingly starting to race to be the first to IPO. In the major news, obviously, is around SpaceX. You've also got OpenAI. You've got Anthropic. So, at a high level, what are some of the things you're seeing, and what should investors be aware of and be considering about some of these upcoming IPOs?
Yeah, so like you said, SpaceX, they're kind of starting their roadshow in the next couple weeks with a target of a late June IPO, with OpenAI following likely September-ish and Anthropic targeting October. Um, there's a few things to kind of think about here and um, market dynamics that could shift performance out of the gate. There is only about 10% cash holdings in private accounts right now. That's very low with these three kind of mega IPOs coming to market. SpaceX has a ton of support from retail investors that want to get involved. Um, they're going to have to free up a lot of cash that could have some short-term negative effects on pricing elsewhere in the market, which could additionally make an opportunity if there's something that you like that you think is a little rich right now. With that, also with these IPOs, a lot of times there's a 90 to 180 day hold period for early investors, so people that were in pre-IPO, they've seen valuations soar over this time. And with a lot of those being institutional investors, they see this as a liquidity event and a way to take those paper gains and make them real gains.
Yeah.
So there is a chance that once those lockup periods expire, we could see kind of a large supply of shares come to market at that point.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely something to keep an eye on. I think it's people you need to realize that you'll probably see some big numbers that are quoted on the first day of trading for a lot of these stocks. I think on average in 2025, the stat that you sent over is they increase about 37% on the first day pop. But it's important to realize one, when can you actually buy the shares? Because a lot of the times those numbers that you see, you're getting in kind of towards the top of that percentage gain because it's really hard to pick a limit price and then what that might lead to and hoping that your shares get filled. It's a complicated event, and a lot of times investors aren't really seeing that full gain of the first day pop.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially with these oversubscribed IPOs, a large portion is going to groups that have established relationships with the banks that are kind of working the IPO.
Yeah.
And again, looking at that 90 to 180 day lockup period, it could be advantageous for some investors to kind of wait and see, let the market kind of digest the initial offering, and then hopefully have some advantageous pricing when
Yeah.
we see some of those institutions start to offload shares.
Right, right. It's definitely something to keep an eye on. And to your point earlier, with investors not having a lot of cash, what could they potentially sell? To me, the most interesting thing to watch will be what happens with Tesla stock. Are there
Mm.
certain people that sell their Tesla stock and look to put that into SpaceX instead? What type of an announcement that Elon Musk could make around Tesla stock? Many people speculate about a potential merger, with SpaceX. So a lot of these things are pure speculation, but Elon Musk is definitely one that can. He's a bit of a showman as well, and that's part of his strategy is to create interest, excitement around his companies of what they could be in the future. So yeah, definitely something to keep an eye on. You just want to make sure that if you are investing in this, make sure it's money that you could afford to see drop. Don't try to over allocate too much of your savings into some of these speculative IPOs because you may be better off waiting, like you said, after that 90 to 100 days or maybe even a year out. Remember that these stocks, they'll be trading in the future too, right? It's not just on this one day or this first week. A lot of these stocks over a 1 year period tend to underperform the market anyway. So you might be better off, waiting and looking to get into these at a later date. Yeah, but like I mentioned, I just wanted to touch on that briefly, and something that we'll be continuing to digest, over the course of these next upcoming weeks. But for this week, like we mentioned, so those are some of the big highlights of what we saw. Markets hitting record highs, keeping an eye on inflation and what that could mean for interest rates, and then obviously a lot of the IPO buzz. So if there's anything else that you're following in the stock market, in any certain sectors, please leave a comment below. We'd love to discuss these certain things with you. And again, thanks for joining us this week.